The history of Stonewall you didn't know. The history of the Stonewall Riots, like much of the history of the LGBTQ plus rights movement, is full of false information, drama, embellished stories, myths, and larger-than-life characters. They were far from the first riot in the history of LGBTQ plus rights, and yet they became a catalyst for change. Here are some of the facts that you may not know about the Stonewall Riots.
Many people don't realize it, but the Stonewall Inn was kind of a dump. It was owned and operated by the Genovese mafia family. The drinks were expensive and watered down. The bar itself was grimy and run down. There were nicer gay bars in New York at the time, but the Stonewall Inn was a relatively safe refuge for the fringe members of the LGBTQ plus community, such as transgender individuals and the leather community.
The Stonewall Riots weren't the birthplace of the fights for gay rights, even in New York. Until 1966, it was illegal to serve gay patrons alcohol. It was a gay rights group called the Mattachine Society who staged a sip-in at a bar called Julius's that helped change that law.
The night of the Stonewall Riots weren't the first police raid. They were very common through the 60s, as public displays of affection between same-sex couples were still illegal. Bars like Stonewall would pay off the police departments, but raids still happened when cops wanted more money or if the politicians wanted some good press. It was one of these common raids that started the events of June 28, 1969.
Many claim that the death of Judy Garland sparked the riots. Interviews with people who were at the event show that this was not the truth. It was mounting frustrations with poor treatment and another raid just a few days earlier that finally sparked the confrontation.
Many credit Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera for starting the riot, but they both claimed that they weren't even near the Stonewall Inn until things were well underway. Some credit Stormy Delaverine, and while she was given mixed answers, there was likely no one individual who started the fights. Also, there was no bricks thrown, as is sometimes claimed.
The riots also weren't just one night. The activism and conflicts continued for almost a week, and during that time, such influential groups as Gay Liberation Front and Gay Activist Alliance were formed.
1 year later, the Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day March took place. This became the first gay pride. Many people are unaware of the facts of what happened at the Stonewall Inn, but the riots are important for how they continue to inspire. Much like the LGBTQ plus community, our movement is as much inspired by the over-the-top myths and characters as it is by any factual account of the event. The most important part of the Stonewall Riots are the legacy of inspiring the fight for equality.
I think it's really important to know the actual history, because you can praise the embellishments, you can think it's all amazing, but if you do not know the facts of what actually happened, you don't realize how much injustice was caused.
Right.
LGBTQ plus education is so crucial, and sorry to shamelessly plug, but that is why the work that I do with PRISM to expand access to inclusive LGBTQ plus education is so important, because it's riddled and there's so many sources that say different things. So what are the reader going to believe at the end of the day?
Yeah, what's true?
Not to have a hot take here, and while I think that queer education is very important, especially in schools, and we need that more integrated, I think the story aspect, dramatizing it, having this event that you can put as this story for people to hear and tell, can spread the message just so much more effectively. When people in social situations get caught up with facts and stuff, it can cause arguments or lag the story.
And people get bored, so they don't pay attention.
But when you can have this cohesive, inspiring fight that causes people to get angry and want to have justice, I think it can have more impact and more just ability to spread when you have that more dramatized story.
No, I agree in that sense. It's very important to have stories. I mean, like we mentioned earlier, it's important to have that representation and to have inspiring stories. Full-heartedly agree.
I do agree. I never really thought of it in that aspect, but I do understand that, dramatizing a story and really making a story kind of cohesive allows for this, I want to say, teaching of the story to be more valid, not more valid, but more approachable in a way. It allows for obviously cohesiveness, but it kind of sets this. I lost my train of thought. I always do this. But what I'm trying to get at is that it's really remarkable to have such a cohesive story because it allows for the approachativeness for it, but it also kind of empowers and allows for other people to want to investigate more and want to bring up the facts because the facts are one thing, but trying to make a story entertaining to people that are younger who have a less attention span than some adults and whatnot can be really hard. So making that story really outlandish but also true to the facts is can be a gift.
It's like what's going to engage a room of new people, new allies, possibly new members of the community.
Exactly.
Saying, oh yeah, well, some people, we don't really know who started it, really. They were out there. It was probably some fight, scuffle. Rather than saying Marsha P. Johnson walked up and chucked a brick into a crowd of police officers pulling people out of the gay bar. Like, what is going to get a room engaged and excited?
Exactly.
I think it's important that we do both, that we have these important emotional, inspirational stories, but that we also teach the history because it is our queer history and it's who we are. And guess what? Kids are gay. Kids are finding out who they are more and more every single day. So they deserve to learn their own history.
Right. And while we're in the month of June, I think it's important to remember that we have to thank the people that came before us because now we have the opportunity to have pride celebrations that aren't riots. And while the underlying message is we want justice, we want equality, we want our rights, it's also a celebration. So it's so important to remember that it started as a riot and now we are lucky enough and blessed enough to have the opportunity to be who we are openly without having to explicitly fight.
Of course.
While also being a reminder that we're ready to riot again if we need to.
Exactly. We will band together just like before.
The past generation paved the way for us and we will pave the way for the next generation.
Exactly.
Even if Representative Green doesn't like that.
And like you were saying, we're paving the way for the future generation, but we're also paving the way for their presence in our history books. I mean, with the banning of the books and all that stuff, we don't know how harsh anti-LGBTQ plus legislation can get in the state of Florida, but also wide. It allows us to really fight for their presence in our history books, so people know the origins of gay liberation, but also understand that these ancestors fought for our place to stay here and what we need to do as the current generation to help out future generations from not facing the same harsh discrimination or ambiguity that we faced.
And I think that's where it matters most, to link it back to the true history rather than the story.
Right.
We've certainly come a long way, but I feel like there are still more steps that need to be taken, like passing the Equality Act and overturning these brash laws that are being made here in Florida and Texas and so many other places in the country.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the